When we last left off, the kids of Gotham Academy, they had just made the detective club, and something else happened between the pages as well. Welcome to the Complete Story Series, where I take trade paperbacks and single issues and I break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then I read it dramatically back to you, all alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Our story begins on a sad note. The school is silent, and everyone attends a funeral, and that funeral is for Olive's mother. She's passed away. Olive stands there and everyone tries to tell her that they are sorry for her loss. Kyle goes to console Olive, but before he can go to her, he sees Tristan already there, and Olive and Tristan walk away. The next day at school, Kyle can't seem to shake this uneasy feeling about Tristan, and it's to the point of affecting his tennis practice. Coach Humphries grabs the tennis balls and tells Kyle that he needs to underspin to get those approach shots, but Kyle really isn't listening. Coach Humphries throws the ball at Kyle and then he begins to storm off since his student isn't bothering learning, and that's when Kyle notices someone underneath the bleachers. As he gets closer, he notices that it's Tristan. But why is Tristan here? After Tristan begins to leave, Kyle starts to follow him as he goes to Dr. Langstrom's lab. Inside, Kyle overhears Tristan and Dr. Langstrom discussing Tristan's condition and how they can't fix it right now. And Kyle sees Tristan turn into a man-bat. Kyle falls over screaming no, and he runs off to tell Olive what happened. He begins to beat on her door, telling her that he knows that she's in here. She's got to stay away from Tristan. But when Olive opens the door, she tells him that she just wants to be left alone. Kyle tells her that she needs to stay away from Tristan. And Olive tells him that he can't tell her who she can and cannot hang out with. He tries to tell Olive that this is different. Tristan is actually a bad guy, but Olive finishes putting on her coat, telling Kyle to grow up, and storms out of the room. Kyle asks where she's going and she tells him that she has a guidance appointment and not to follow her. Kyle slumps down saying that he just wanted to keep her safe, and that's when he hears a voice. Oh my crap, we're bad on campus. Maps brings Kyle to a secret tunnel that Croc had used in her last adventure, and she begins to ask about Tristan. She says this is like Christmas and her birthday and Easter and everything rolled up into one, and then she begins to chew on her book. Kyle tells her that they need to focus, and he asks if these tunnels can get them to the guidance office. Maps tells him yes, and she'll take him there only if Kyle promises to take her to meet this man-bat. Maps and Kyle sneak through the tunnels to listen to Olive's meeting with Professor Strange. And Professor Strange tells Olive that these are some hard times, but maybe it will do her some good to talk to someone. Maybe even a friend? Olive tells Professor Strange that she does have a friend, Tristan. She can talk to him. And with that news, Kyle tells Maps that they're gonna go find Tristan now. Maps gets super excited that she is finally gonna be on her first B&E. And Kyle tells her that he's the prefect, so technically it's not a B&E. They're just gonna tell Tristan that they were doing room checks. But while Maps is checking out his collection of black t-shirts, Tristan gets back to his room and he asks what they're doing there. Kyle tries to tell him that they're doing room checks, but Maps confronts him right away, telling him that they know that he's a werebat. Tristan tries to defend himself, telling them that they have no clue what they're talking about, but then Kyle tells Tristan that he's not going to leave unless Tristan tells them what's going on. Tristan, in response, transforms and escapes out the window. Maps and Kyle run outside and they chase Tristan through the graveyard, and when they catch up, they find Tristan laying by a gravestone with a wound in his chest. He asks for their help, so Kyle begins to help him up and take him back to Dr. Langstrom. Dr. Langstrom tells him that they need to go get Professor McPherson, and while Map goes to get the professor, Kyle decides that he needs to find Olive and tell her everything that happened involving Tristan. Kyle finds Olive down by the docks, and he begins to explain what happened with Tristan. Kyle then tells her that he knows that Tristan means something to her, but does she really know anything about him? Olive tells him that they need to talk, and it's about her. Olive tells him that those fires from before, they were her, and Tristan came to save her. If you're curious about what we learned about those fires, it's in the last video. She goes on to say that it also happened a second time, and that her mom was locked away in Arkham for starting fires as well. But before she can ask the question on her mind, which is, are they going to lock her up for similar powers? Kyle tells her not to worry. He won't let anyone take her away. And then they kiss. Olive looks surprised and tells him that that was a mistake, so go on ahead and she'll be right behind him. Olive then turns back and sees a letter floating in the water, and she picks it up and begins to read it. And oddly, it's a letter written from her mother, telling her not to trust anyone. But remember, she does love her, and it's signed, until they meet again. While she's reading this letter though, someone in ragged clothing is looming over her. As Olive finishes reading the letter, she feels something behind her, and that's when she turns around and sees Maps, and everyone else from the detective club. Olive hides the letter in her pocket and Maps tells her that they need to go find what attacked Tristan. So the students all go off to where Tristan was attacked. When they get there, Palmline finds what seems to be fur, and that's when Colton looks at it and tells everyone that it needs to be analyzed. He takes them to his RV in the woods, and Maps' response to that is, "Holy cannoli, you have a secret laboratory!" Inside, Colton determines that the fur they found was wolf hair. And Palmline tells everyone not to worry, she knows how to handle werewolves. They all go back to her room where she hands out silver necklaces to everyone, and that's when Maps notices that Olive isn't with them. Back in Olive's room, Olive came back to find Catherine, Maps' roommate, taking down some of Olive's posters. When she turns around to see Olive there, her eyes look really weird, and that's when she runs out of the room, and Olive goes to put her posters back on the walls when she hears something. She looks down as she sees an envelope, and written on it is Silverlock Olive Classified. She begins to read it and discovers that it's filled with information all about her, as well as things about her mom being a costume villain. Before she can look any further, Maps runs inside and tells Olive that they have to go hunt down the werewolf, but Olive stops her and tells her that she needs to go see Professor Strange first. Olive heads over to his office and shows him the file that she found and asks why she's being watched over. He explains that there's actually two students being watched over, her and Tristan. So Olive goes to see Tristan and asks how he's doing. Tristan tells her that this isn't bad compared to being shot with a crossbow, and that's when Olive explains that both her and Tristan were placed here and they're being monitored. And that's when a werewolf comes bursting in screaming revenge. The werewolf snarls and he yells that Milo cursed him, and now he's going to curse everyone here. Tristan grabs the werewolf and he flies him outside as Palmline, Kyle, and Colton show up asking if everything's okay. Maps asks if anyone else noticed that the werewolf was wearing Coach Humphrey's clothing, and Professor McPherson asks, "A werewolf? Doctor, you have some explaining to do." Dr. Langstrom mentions that he was a little late on creating the antidote, but Colton tells him that he might be able to actually help with that. Olive and the rest of the gang run over to find Tristan, but Tristan explains that the wolf got away, and everyone starts to search for the werewolf, and that's when Olive hears something in the woods. At that moment, the werewolf appears, and then she hears a voice, and everything begins to turn red. A figure begins to appear behind Olive, telling her to use it. Use her fire! Burn everything! They did this to her! Now everything needs to burn! But just before Olive can begin to use her fire powers, Colton appears and tranquilizes the werewolf. As the dart begins to take effect, the werewolf changes back into Coach Humphreys. The professors then all show up and they tell everyone that it's time to go back to their dorm rooms. And as the students begin to head back to their dorms, Palmline stops Olive, telling her that she needs to talk to her privately. The two of them walk into the theater nearby, and Palmline tells Olive that she kind of stole the letter that Olive was trying to hide. Upset, Olive starts to yell at Palmline, but Palmline tells her that she had to. She's been doing some research on this Calamity person. But Olive stopped paying attention to Palmline because her attention is now turned towards the stage because Calamity is there. She turns to Palmline and tells them that they need to get out of here now. And an instant later, the theater begins to catch fire. As the building begins to fill with smoke, the students that were rehearsing their play and Mr. Trent, the theater director, manage to escape outside. Mr. Trent is flabbergasted because he doesn't know what he's gonna do now. He's already lost some of his students in the play, and now with this, he's gonna lose more. What is he gonna do? Before Maps' roommate Catherine can offer to help with the play, Olive decides that it would be a good chance to investigate the theater, and she jumps ahead of Catherine, volunteering. Yes, a lot of the students have been getting hurt there, but now that Olive saw her mother, she is certain that she'll find some clues. A few days later, the students begin rehearsing when Colton notices a muddy footprint. As the students go to check it out, they notice that it leads to a dead end. As they continue rehearsing, Olive begins to go through her lines when she notices something dripping on her head. Is it mud? She looks up and she sees someone trying to untie a sandbag. She jumps out of the way just before the sandbag comes crashing down. The students begin to chase down the hooded figure, but they end up following them with muddy footprints to a dead end. And that's when Map sees something on the ground. It's her map of the auditorium. No one should have this. And that's when Map realizes the only person who could have this. Everyone heads over to Map's dorm room to ask Catherine about the map, but when they get there, they see more mud on the ground, and they pull back the curtains to see Catherine, and her face is dripping! It's mud literally melting off! The girls all scream, and the mud-like Catherine escapes out the windows. Everyone goes back to the theater to find Catherine there, but when they try to talk to her, more mud swirls around her, and soon a giant clay figure tells them that there is only Clayface. Olive and Maps quickly grab a hose and they begin to spray down Clayface until he starts to dissolve away. Boy, he really isn't a villain to be feared, and the only person left standing is Catherine as he dissolves. Olive and Maps begin to walk Catherine home, realizing Catherine's father is Clayface, and he was behind the accidents at the theater because Clayface held a grudge against Mr. Trent, the theater director. Olive begins to wonder if what she saw was really her mother, and that's when Palmline comes running up with a newspaper, and she tells her that the newspaper is stating that Calamity is back in Gotham. Olive sits back wondering if this could possibly be true, and if it is, does that mean her mother is actually alive? Olive continues her visits with Professor Strange regarding the visions that she's been having about her mother, and she shows him the paper stating that Calamity is back in Gotham. She then tells him that she needs to go see if her mother is really alive, but Professor Strange tells her that that's probably a bad idea, but he can tell that she's already made up her mind. So the plan is set. The students are going to go to Kyle's tennis tournament, which is being held in Gotham, and then they're going to sneak off to City Hall to find the paper records of Olive's mother. As they get to the stadium, Kyle fakes falling down to draw everyone's attention, and the students begin to sneak off. Olive and Maps end up going to City Hall, while Colton and Palmline go to Palmline's mother's law offices to look for case records. Olive and Maps end up taking the subway to City Hall, and they sneak in through the roof, and once the coast is clear, they head over to the records room to try and find the file on Sybil. Olive assumes that it's going to take a while, but that's when she stumbles on the Silverlock family records. So she asks Map to keep watch while she goes through these records. As Maps leaves the record room, she runs into Red Robin. Without even thinking, she throws the batarang that she got from Damien, which if you're curious about that, we'll also link that video down below. And Red Robin catches it and notices that this isn't a fake one. So he asks, "What kind of Robin are you?" She's confused. Isn't he Robin? And he tells her that no, he's Red Robin, which confuses Maps even more. Aren't all Robins red? Red Robin explains that right now there's a whole bunch of kids running around calling themselves Robin. Red Robin tells her that he's gotta go though. He doesn't have much time and needs to get into the records room. Maps tries to stop him, telling him that Olive needs more time to look into Calamity, which she realizes was probably a mistake. And Red Robin explains that he's all about Calamity. Batman and the original Robin went to rescue some people from a burning building when they ran into Calamity. Robin managed to stop Calamity, but that's when he took off Calamity's mask and they discovered that it was Sybil Silverlock. So Batman had Sybil locked up, and then he took her young daughter and he put her somewhere safe so that she can be watched and monitored. Back inside, Olive continues going through the family records, and she notices that all of the Silverlocks have either been troubled or thrown in prison or asylums. And that's when Olive begins to wonder if she too will end up with that same fate, and a voice begins to call out to her. When she looks back, she sees Calamity, her mother. Maps and Red Robin run in to see Calamity starting a fire and talking to Olive. So Red Robin jumps in to fight Calamity, and Calamity tells Olive that they'll meet again, and then disappears. But as she leaves, she dropped something. Red Robin has to go though, he has other things going on, so Maps asks him how she can contact him for their next mission, and he tells her he'll get in touch with her, Robin. Maps then gets a call from Palmline, but before Maps can tell Olive what happened, Maps just says, "Oh my crap." Olive and Maps rush over to the stadium because Palmline told her that Kyle went missing. The last place that he was the lockers before he went missing, so the students decided to go start looking there. Everyone went off looking for Kyle, and no one bothered to look for a clue inside of his locker. Colton breaks it open, and Olive notices something inside that looks like the thing that Calamity dropped in the records room. After Olive puts the two pieces together, she notices that this is a key to Arkham Asylum. The next day, Maps' parents come to pick her up from school and take her away until they can find Kyle. But Maps has a better idea. She's gonna have Catherine, who happens to be made out of clay, pretend that she is Maps so that the real Maps can go find Kyle. Olive and Maps hop in Colton's car, which he obviously either stole or not and doesn't have a license for, and they all drive over to Arkham, and that's when they walk in. But as they're going in, Palmline tells Olive that maybe she should wait outside. All of this stuff going on with Calamity, Olive might be a liability. Not happy about it, Olive does decide it might be a good idea, and she decides to wait outside while everyone goes back inside. Once Maps and everyone gets inside, Palmline asks how they are supposed to find Kyle in this maze, and Maps tells her, "Easy. Hey, Kyle!" Maps, "Help, I'm down here." Easy peasy, Detective Club for the win. But Olive, who is waiting outside, begins to hear a voice calling to her again, and she looks up and sees a figure standing in a tower nearby. Once Olive goes inside the tower, she starts to hear Calamity's voice again through a door. So she tries to break through it without much luck, and that's when the door begins to creak open. Olive walks inside and finds Calamity's costume on a table, and that's when she hears another voice telling her that her mother is alive, inside of her. Olive looks back to see that the voice that is telling her this is Professor Strange, and he tells Olive that he once knew Olive's mother. She was a patient of his. No one knew more about Sybil than him. However, he wasn't able to unlock the secrets of Calamity, the secrets held for generations by the Silverlocks, secrets now only inside of Olive. Professor Strange has been wearing Sybil's costume to try and learn more, but now that Olive is here, she can become Calamity. Olive starts to ask if he knew so much about her mother, then how did she die? And she pushes closer and closer, and fire begins to brew around her. Professor Strange starts to panic, and he tells her, "It wasn't him, it was Calamity." But Olive keeps pushing him, pushing closer, and the fire gets stronger, and she tells him to tell her the truth. After rescuing Kyle, Maps and the rest of the group hear a scream, and they begin to run upstairs. They enter the room, and Maps asks what happened, and Olive tells her that Calamity saved her. But Colton tells everyone that they have to go. The building is starting to come down because for some reason, it just caught fire. Later at school, Olive begins to walk by Professor McPherson when her dog Ham begins to growl at Olive. McPherson calms the dog down and tells Olive that Kyle's parents are here to thank her, but Olive tells her that she really isn't up for that kind of thing right now. She wanted to tell McPherson about everything that had happened, about Professor Strange, her mom. She didn't feel like it was the right time. McPherson tells her that if there's anything she wants to talk about, she'll be here for her. And Olive thinks that she really doesn't need someone to talk to finally, for the first time. She actually feels good. For the first time since being put in Gotham Academy, she feels whole. She has her answers. Now this concludes the Gotham Academy first 2 arcs, and they went to a series called Yearbook that we won't be covering, but the book will be coming back with DC Rebirth. So I hope you're as excited about it as I am. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Comicstorian and Instagram at Comicstorian, and I'll see you guys next time right here.